Carlos Bermudez, and today we're going to be talking about globalization, terror, and the shaming of a nation, constructing local masculinities in a Sri Lankan village. So please, embark on this journey with me.
Before we begin our journey, let's acquaint the audience as to Sri Lanka's location. Sri Lanka, the small island nation, is located off the southeastern shores of India. In Sri Lanka, violent tension has been rising since the 1940s due to globalization and colonial enforcement. Ethnic tension escalated in the 1970s, and a civil war broke out in the 1980s and lasted until 2009. During the late 80s was around the time that our author conducted her ethnography and focused on the terror that had plagued the country. Johnny De Silva walked into a series of events which took place between November 1989 to January 1990, when 22 schoolboys attending the most prestigious high school in the district were abducted from their homes by masked gunmen. These schoolboys were taken to a neighboring army camp, tortured, and killed. A pivotal event in Sri Lanka. This reflects all of the underlying issues that have existed throughout this country's history. Captivated by this tragedy, De Silva wrote this ethnography concerning the difference between cultures who accept globalization and those who fight it, what it takes to construct locality and identity, the abductions and how it affected the teacher-pupil bond, and what is considered appropriate conduct and contesting inappropriate conduct.
John, where's Jay?
I don't know. Let's go look. Oh, there he is. Jay, we need to do a project. Jay.
Oh yeah, dude, I totally forgot.
Come on, man.
Let's get down.
Tuesday, we have class in 5 minutes. We gotta get this done.
I totally forgot. Oh my god, that ups the ante like 10 times.
man,
I totally forgot. But since we're getting started, let me put down my bike and we'll get started with research questions and methods. I'm gonna go stand/sit later in this film by this tree. Told you I was gonna lean against a tree. But now on to research questions. Our group found these to be De Silva's research questions. Why were the 22 boys killed, and who killed them? How is locality constructed, and what do masculinity, status, and shame have to do with it? Also, how does globalization affect the construction of locality? And lastly, what is the role of women within the context of Sri Lankan hegemonic masculinity? Whew, those were a lot of questions. So, I'm going to move on to methodologies. But first, because I'm winded from breathing so hard from reading that paragraph, I'm going to sit down. Come join me. Sit with me. Okay, like I said, to write this ethnography, De Silva took to many different approaches. Her main focus was on narratives. She presented several perspectives surrounding the schoolboy murders. She also gathered data from interviews, participant observation, and living with the Sri Lankan family. Her close interactions with Sri Lankans allowed her to create ties and connections with the Navagamane. She read large amounts of literature and developed a great knowledge of Sri Lankan history, which greatly grounded her research.
Moving on to the data section, we decided on 5 main points. The Laja, 3 stories regarding shame in women, women abroad, building locality, and the importance of language. We will begin with the term laja. This directly translates to shame. Laja baya is the fear of public ridicule. It is also associated with appropriate conduct and became a way to control the sexuality of women. Da Silva gave three main stories that demonstrate women's roles and the power that laja has over them. These stories display the effects of three girls trying to exert more agency into their lives. The first was publicly ridiculed after being sexualized and ended up killing herself because of the shame. The second girl attempted to play a political role and ended up being killed by armed forces. The third girl was victorious in gaining a position in public office because she was not sexualized. Wow, laja seems to be really important in this culture.
The examples of agency in these three stories is somewhat represented in the developing labor market for women abroad. With a low availability of jobs in Sri Lanka, women have increasingly taken up the offer to work abroad in the Middle East. These women send home remittances to their families as financial support. However, families become disrupted and tensions arise between husbands and wives as a result of the ever-present hegemonic masculinity that is prominent in Sri Lanka. With women becoming the primary breadwinners, men fall into depression and alcoholism because of the underlying shame they feel. Switching gears, De Silva observed what it takes to build a community in Sri Lanka. It was both a physical and cultural effort, as globalization loomed across the country. Locality needs to be created and endlessly nurtured against the corrosion of contingencies of every sort. Though the village of Navagamane is wealthy in material objects, there are high levels of marital discord, violence, and suicide. Identity is formed through the community as it incorporates shame and status. The stability of a given society remains closely tied to the specifics of the code of masculinity. As migrants with skilled professions began arriving, social divisions grew even wider. The construction of locality is heavily based on gender and status.
Continuando con nuestra tema de la masculinidad.
Continuing with our theme of masculinity, De Silva's knowledge of the local language allowed her to better understand Sri Lankan culture.
A entender mejor la cultura.
Over time, the Sri Lankan language Sinhalese has made space for the division of separate masculine structures.
Estos incluyen cinco etiquetas.
These include 5 ascending hierarchical labels, starting with smaller younger brother, Podimoli, all the way to biggest eldest brother, Loku Aya.
Hay etiquetas similares para
There are
los
similar
hombres,
labels for
pero
females,
las
but the
frecuencias
frequency they are
que
used
se
happens to be
utilizan
rare.
pasa a ser raro. Este es un
This is a prime
excelente
example
ejemplo
of
de
the
la
hegemonic
defensora de la
masculinity Sri Lanka
masculinidad
advocates.
hegemónica de Sri Lanka.
Muy bien.
Gracias.
Hello, my name is Alex Ballou, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about the theories involved in this ethnography. As we mentioned earlier, with the use of the word laja and other masculine terms that stratify its family unit, linguistics plays an important role in De Silva's research. Her explanations, definitions, and deconstructions of these terms help us elaborate our understanding. An obvious theory throughout this book is gender and how the culture influences it. There are specialized expectations for both men and women with regards to their roles in society. Both genders are susceptible to shame. To bring in structuralism, we discovered the binary oppositions that exist between masculinity and femininity, as well as between status and shame. Our final theory is discourse. According to De Silva, the people of Sri Lanka are subjected to global signs that affect the creation of their identity and selfhood. It also brings along collective violence, which has been brought in through media outlets, and therefore has greatly affected Sri Lanka.
To conclude our presentation,
We'd like to say globalization has had a detrimental effect on Sri Lankan culture.
creating a state of terror and hegemonic masculinity.